everyone. Welcome back to the negotiation table. My name is Wincy Hong, and I'm the communication specialist here at HGEA. With us today, we have Unit 13 member Karen Kama, speech pathologist. Hello. We also have HGEA's Field Services Officer from the MSc and Advocacy Department, Scott Collins. So, mahalo both of you for making time for our discussion today. And before we dive into today's conversation, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, like, so that we continue to make content like this and so that you never miss an episode. So, let's dive in. Whether it's state or local county government, everywhere we're finding that departments are understaffed and HGA members are putting in heroic efforts to keep up the quality of services despite vacancy rates of upwards of 40%. In fact, recent reports on the county and state levels point towards an employment crisis of the likes we've never seen before in Hawaii. So, what is driving this problem? Where are all the workers, and is there a way out of this? According to a recent report from the State Department of Human Resources Development, as of December 2023, more than 1 in 4 civil service positions are vacant in state government. In addition, the vacancy rate is the highest it has ever been in 5 years. Public sector unions have renewed their calls on government to get serious about resolving this crisis, especially with the 30% of the workforce expected to retire in the next 5 years. So, to kick us off, my first question is for you, Scott. As someone who is working directly with our members out in the field, can you give us an overview of this problem in local and state government?
Yeah, over the years, this problem, which always existed, has definitely worsened and been compounded. You're hearing that doesn't matter the work site nowadays, whether it be state, whether it be city, whether it be the Department of Education, judiciary, vacancy rates are rising, which is causing additional strain on many of our members. Ultimately, that's where the burden falls on because the work still has to get done.
Right.
So there's a lot of issues that have contributed to this, which we've been trying to address and fight with the members' help, over the years, but need to get more movement on.
What departments or positions are hit hardest by this recruitment crisis? And, are there certain jobs that are affected more than others in this issue, or would you say it's quite universal?
It's definitely universal, but there are hotspots. There are particular departments and particular positions that definitely see a higher vacancy rate. One example is the Hawaii County dispatchers. I know because they were so significantly short-staffed, they weren't allowed to take their breaks, their lunch breaks, their regular union mandated breaks. They had to work 12-hour shifts, and some individuals had to work 13 days in a row without getting a day off. The dispatchers for police here in Honolulu, I've heard instances of them being so short there's only 1 or 2 individuals on the call for the entire island during a specific period, which I can't imagine dealing with that. Sometimes they're so short that they have to get relieved. Somebody actually has to relieve them to go get up and go use the bathroom. And I've heard of instances where that potentially has caused, individuals to have problems, and nobody deserves to go through something like that. I know in Maui, correctional nurses are working more days, longer hours because they're so significantly short-staffed. I think there's some facilities where they're just down to 2 nurses for the entire facility. All the correctional facilities here on Oahu as well, I know nurses have to work straight through the pandemic and have to work long 12-hour shifts because of the shortages, and they can't not provide the service. There has to be individuals there providing the care. So those are some examples that members have to go through and have to deal with because the vacancies are so significant.
My next question is for you, Karen. So you are a speech language pathologist in our public schools. What are you hearing about your job type specifically? The last we saw was there was a 23% vacancy for SLPs. So would you say there are schools or areas that are harder to fill than others? And what would you say the sentiment is among your fellow SLPs?
There's a definite shortage. I currently work in Leeward District where we have the most significant shortage. From what I remember, about 13 and a half to 14 and a half positions right now remain vacant. And according to those I've spoken to, we've never filled those vacancies in the last 20 plus years. So a lot of the difficulties that we're having now have been happening for quite some time. It's very depressing for a lot of the members. Our fear is that students would go without services, and we never want that to happen. So SLPs go above and beyond trying to make sure that services aren't missed and children are getting the quality speech therapy services that they deserve, but it does put us at stress. So typically you would want to have one SLP based at a school, and the reason for that is a lot of just the continuity, right? You want the children to be familiar with somebody, and it keeps the quality of service as well. And then the speech therapist is able to build relationships with the teachers, with the administrators, and with the parents, right? Because we're a team working with the children. But when we have to cover multiple schools, it becomes kind of frantic. SLPs are having to get to know students quickly that they don't know, having to work with teachers and administration very quickly. So we're kind of just thrust into difficult situations. Everyone's trying to do the best that they can, but it is very stressful. So I'm not quite sure how much the department has really proactively tried to rectify the situation. The DOE has been giving SLPs a shortage differential for decades. But with this shortage differential, it still doesn't bring SLP's salary up to our mainland counterparts of cities that have similar economies. So SLPs in Hawaii are still getting paid probably 20 to 30,000 less than SLPs who are working in urban areas such as New York City, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, those types of places. So it's really hard to recruit quality SLPs, who I know many have actually left to work in those areas too.
And a pretty infamous example of a vacancy problem, aside from, speech language pathologists, are in the Department of Planning and Permitting in the city and county of Honolulu. A recent news article on the vacancy problem in DPP summed it in this way: one way to ease Honolulu's building permit backlog, pay workers more. So let's talk a bit about why we are in this situation. So for Scott, that news article I mentioned boiled down the issue to pay. In fact, officials were even quoted as saying that some in DPP feel like they could take jobs even at Starbucks or Target for the pay that they're getting as a civil servant. So is this crisis really about pay, or are there bigger problems that are going on?
I think there is several major issues that have contributed to this enormous problem, but at the forefront, the primary issue is compensation. We have made, for instance, with the DOE, with Karen folks, we have made numerous efforts to try to get the employer and the departments to raise the salary range and salary schedule, the SR rating, so to speak, of specific positions that we feel we're in the most need, have the highest vacancy rates. We're in hard to fill areas like the Leeward District, where Karen is from. So we have made those numerous requests with the Department of Education as well as other departments for specific positions, but have not been successful to date in getting the employers to agree with us on upgrading these salary levels for these employees, which is why we have over the last several of years been introducing and pushing a specific reclassification bill at the legislature, which would change the law and actually give us a third party reviewer to deal with disagreements regarding repricing requests. Because how it currently is structured, usually the personnel departments on the employer side kind of have the full discretion and authority on whether or not to grant those requests. And to my knowledge, I don't believe any repricing request hasn't been granted in the last 5+ years for at least the state jurisdiction. This bill, which we are continuously, pushing and trying to get passed into law would give us that mechanism for that, neutral, objective individual to hear the concerns that we have and ultimately make the final decision. That's what we have been trying to do as the representative, to try to increase the salaries of the employees, but the compensation package as a total also includes the benefits. And the benefits, are something that were very highly regarded in state government and city government for many, many decades and years. That was always a perk. Everybody tried to get in government because of the benefits, because of the pension, because of the medical. That has been eroded over years, where those types of benefits are not comparable to the private sector, which is another reason why it's difficult to recruit and retain employees. The employers have not adapted with the times. It's a different workforce. It's a younger workforce. It's a younger generation who have different priorities. And a major priority for them is flexibility. Telework in the workforce nowadays is, once was viewed as a benefit, it's almost demand now from workers entering the workforce. We do have, it all depends on the department. Some are more open and inclined to offer that as a benefit than others, but those who are more strict, definitely lose out on applicants and employees by not offering that as part of their workforce. And finally, another significant reason is just the amount of time it takes to get applicants on board, to get them evaluated, to get them interviewed, and ultimately hired by government is way too long, and is not on par with the private sector. When you're looking for a job, you're not just applying to one place. You're applying everywhere and anywhere. By the time you hear back from your government application, whether your application has been received, verified, and they're looking to schedule you for an interview, is 6, 8, 9 months down the line, and you already started employment in your job. So that's another significant challenge that we're dealing with in government about bringing employees into the workforce.
If I can add into that, as far as competition goes, kind of like what Scott was saying, when I started back in 2006, and my mother working for the DOE and retiring from the DOE, we were very much ingrained with state jobs are secure, that this is where you want to go, the retirement is good. However, as the years have gone with budget deficits and whatever the state views, pension benefits have decreased. So SLPs who are just starting now, their retirement package looks nothing like my current retirement package, which looks nothing like what my mother retired with. So those kinds of things do not attract people in, especially if you're working for the state and then you need to go and have other investments to make sure that your, retirement is secure. Hospital jobs, early intervention, there's a bunch of different places that speech language pathologists can work. And now with telework, there are SLPs who can work in different states from working at home that are a lot more flexible and a lot less stressful. So I think the department needs to look at not necessarily only pay, which is a huge thing, but how can we make the Department of Education something that looks better beyond private sector and other states.
So Karen, in your position as someone with specialized training, what do you think is driving the recruitment issues in your profession? Does it really boil down to pay? Is the state competitive enough against the private sector or even private schools for SLPs currently looking for work?
I think for speech language pathologists, it's pretty multifaceted. In general, nationwide, there's a significant shortage of speech language pathologists. So Hawaii is not just the critical hotspot. All the states are dealing with it. It's a highly needed area, but almost a dying art, I would say. It's very hard to get into graduate schools because you don't just need a bachelor's degree, you need a master's degree. And then on top of the master's degree, you need one additional year of your clinical fellowship. So it's a lot of time and a lot of money invested in just to get into that profession. There are thousands that are going to be retiring in the next few years, and we've seen it in our district as well with a handful retiring every year. And we're not able to fill those positions as they're getting vacated. So part of it is knowing that it is hard to get SLPs. So what can the state do to really attract those that do have the certification and especially the experience? Because it's so hard to find people, we often get brand new people coming in, oftentimes contractors from out of state. So it does put a lot of burden on the district and district employees because these SLPs, a lot of them aren't very familiar with working in the schools, specifically working in the Hawaii DOE. There's some cultural things that are difficult for them. And then there's a high turnover of them. So they'll come for like a year or two and then they leave. So you're not getting employees that are invested in our state, in our public schools, that are willing to stay with the state. But if the Department of Education would focus on some salary increases, I think that would attract more SLPs to come to Hawaii and hopefully get some local kids who grew up here to want to come into the profession and therefore stay in our state.
So Scott, earlier you mentioned that there are more systemic issues at play in recruitment, particularly with the state's hiring process. So in many cases, applicants will wait 6 months or more to hear back from the state. Can you talk a little bit more about why the current hiring process can be a barrier to getting people into these job openings quickly?
So oftentimes, if the departments don't have the capabilities themselves, they have to rely on the central personnel agency for whatever jurisdiction. So for the state, it would be DHERD. The city would be the Department of Human Resources, and they deal with applicants for the whole jurisdiction. So all of the state applicants that come in, they have to review them to see if they meet minimum qualifications. They have to review all of the many cumbersome documents that have to be submitted and verified. So oftentimes there's a bottleneck at that central personnel agency before they can actually turn around and give those individuals' names that have passed that check back to the department. Sometimes, can be frustrating, is those central personnel agencies won't give the list back to the department until they get a minimum amount of names first, of eligible names. So even though there may be, a few qualified applicants who may be more than capable of doing the job, they may have a practice of waiting till they hit maybe 5 or 6 names before they actually give that qualified list to the department, which also delays the whole process. And so oftentimes employees or potential employees have to wait a very long time before they actually start work in a state job.
As we can tell, there are real life consequences to so many unfulfilled positions in state government. We've heard from our own HCA nurses, another shortage area, that they're working extra days, longer hours, and even foregoing lunch breaks to ensure continuity of care for their patients. Similarly, permits aren't processed as quickly as the public would like. Emergency dispatchers, as you mentioned a bit earlier, are working mandatory overtime. School psychologists, who are 43% short, are taking on extra caseloads. So let's talk about the effects on services to the public and our members. So back to you, Scott. I mentioned a few examples here of where there are concrete consequences to vacancies. What are you hearing from our members out in the field? Obviously our members don't want the public to face delays and curtailed services, so they're working even harder with less. Can you talk a bit about some of these cases?
Employees have to take on more and more duties, more and more work because of this vacancy issue. So oftentimes they're doing the jobs of 3, 4, 5 people. Maybe even they care about their job, they care about their service to the public, and they don't want that service to suffer. But we're all human. We can only do so much in a 8-hour day. Even with overtime, we can only do so much. So oftentimes they feel the pressure of this additional workload. They feel the pressure from their administrators, from their bosses, as well as from the public, because oftentimes that factors into how the service or the timeliness of the service that the public receives. So then they're upset and they take it out on the workers, which kind of compounds the whole issue and just makes it a very, very difficult working environment. I know a lot of these high vacancy areas are individuals like Karen, who are provide special needs services to individuals, whether that be at the DOE, the speech language pathologist, the school psychologist, or social workers at the Department of Human Services. So it's absolutely vital that service doesn't the quality of service does not get dropped when dealing with this high needs population. But oftentimes they have to take on additional caseloads, additional clients, and just do the best they can in the situation.
Karen, in your particular profession, caring for some of our more vulnerable students in public schools, how are you handling being short-staffed? And, among your colleagues, what are some of the challenges that they face? And are you also doing more with less?
It waxes and wanes depending on if they can find coverage. Like I said, they have to try to get contract workers because we physically can't be at every single school that has a vacancy. The hiccup with that is the contract workers come from a different funding source. So every district gets their allocation of funding. Now, the more contract workers you have, that funding gets used. So unfortunately, something like purchase order monies, supplies that we can use for the job will get taken to pay those contractors. I'm not sure why the state doesn't understand that it's more expensive on their part to hire a contract worker because they're not just paying the worker, but they're paying the contract company. So it is cheaper for them to have a state employee working for them than a contracted employee. And then also because some of that funding gets taken away, we might not be able to get continuing education courses, which we would like to have. And then as far as purchase orders, we don't have a whole lot of funding. They do try to give us as much as they can, the districts. They do try to get us creative, and they're working really hard to make things work too, but it's just kind of putting a bandage, on a big bleed. So a lot of times SLPs use our own money to purchase supplies and activities and things that we use while we're providing therapy services for the students. So it's frustrating. Not only is your paycheck not going as far as it used to due to the economy and inflation, your paycheck is not increasing, but now you're having to purchase things out of your own pocket just to do your job, which that shouldn't happen.
To build off of Karen's answer, which is another major issue we're dealing with, is oftentimes because these positions are already hard to recruit, what the employer and department does is raise the contracted rate for employees coming in just on the temporary basis and providing that service. One, we feel is insulting to the actual employees, the civil service employees in the position. They're bringing in these individuals and paying them at a higher rate, sometimes even a double rate than what their hourly is. Obviously, the employer recognizes that you need to raise the compensation to recruit these employees. So if they're willing to do it for contracted workers, why aren't they willing to do it for the civil service employees that have committed to a career in government?
So hopefully so far we've helped our listeners get a picture of what's going on and why. But now let's turn to how we can solve this problem. With 30% of the workforce expected to retire in the next 5 years, this crisis is likely to get a lot worse before it gets better, unless government acts decisively to solve it. So for Scott, what do you think government can do to solve this? It used to be that government jobs were highly sought after. Not anymore. How can government be competitive again with the private sector? And are there more systemic reforms that state and local government should consider, especially in the recruitment process?
I think they got to start with the most significant and primary concern, which is compensation. Personnel, employees, and individuals are afraid to kind of touch or make any changes to the overall classification system for the state because, rightfully so, if you upgrade certain positions and classifications, it has an effect on others in relation to it. So for instance, if you give one area of individuals an SR rating upgrade, you're going to get others complaining, what about us? While we do see that concern, it's clear the system as a whole has failed, and you have to start somewhere. So we need to just take it one area at a time and continue to address these high vacancy classifications like the SLPs, like the school psychs, and continue to just keep working until we see those vacancy numbers decreased. And then after that, dealing with the pay issue, I think that the benefits concern is something that has to get upgraded by the legislature and the employers. The medical coverage and how much employees have to contribute, as well as the pension, are also significant factors for employees. Another big concern, like I previously mentioned, is dealing with this new workforce, these new age of individuals coming into the workforce and their priorities. Telework, which constantly we get pushback from employers, from legislators, is something departments need to look at and really provide as a benefit to employees coming in. Alternate work schedules, things so individuals can have more flexibility and have more flexibility for their outside employment life. Those are very, very important those individuals, and it would actually improve significantly the recruitment and retention.
For Karen, for your profession in particular, what do you think the state could be doing to make jobs like yours more attractive to your colleagues in the private sector? Are you optimistic that there could be a turnaround soon?
Well, one thing that they did a long time ago when I graduated from undergraduate, this is dating myself, 2000, the Department of Education actually had a partnership with UH Manoa, knowing that it was very difficult to find qualified SLPs that want to stay. They provided a stipend program which would help local kids attend UH Manoa with decreased debt. Therefore, when I graduated, we actually had a pretty good amount of students, SLPs, who decided to stay within the state. I haven't seen that amount of SLPs graduating from UH and staying within the Department of Education since that program ended. We've been working with with HGEA specifically since 2017, and it's been very frustrating. I feel like we've been chasing our tails. We talk to the Board of Education. They're sympathetic, but they say their hands are tied. We speak to the superintendent. No movement there. We have spoken to different legislators that, again, are sympathetic, but it seems like nobody knows what to do or nobody's willing to take the steps to make it better. We're only getting more people that are retiring at the end of the school year. There are some people that I believe would have stayed longer and worked had they had the compensation and made it worthwhile for them. If the department decides to increase SLP's rates to that of our counterparts in similar economics cities and states, I do believe that they would attract and retain SLPs. For now, with the stipend that we get, the salary differential, you would think that they would give you something that would make you want to stay. But in fact, the longer you stay within the profession, they decrease that rate because we're told that we can't make more than our salary rating scale. So an SLP who starts, your first year, your differential is significantly more than an SLP who's been working for 15 or 20 or more years. So there really is not an incentive to stay in the department where you could go to a private sector job and you would constantly be making, more money. And while we understand that, the state budget, changes, and we've very much so been part of the team where our step movements have been on pause. We were part of Furlough Friday and were impacted in that way. And mind you, we were still expected to do the same amount of work in less days. We're trying to be understanding and be team players who we know that we're serving the public to, right? But if they really want to have quality speech language pathologists who are invested in our system, are invested in our state and our children, they need to look at ways to keep SLPs in the profession longer.
To build off of Karen's answer, a lot of the methods that personnel agencies have taken to try to address these shortages or vacancy rates with compensation, like the shortage differential, are just band-aids. They aren't attacking the root of the problem. As she mentioned, you add a shortage differential, but it decreases as the time goes on. That's insulting to employees who want to stay and make a long career with the Department of Education. That's why we have constantly been proposing that method has not worked. It hasn't worked for the last 20 years. And if you actually look at the salary ranges and reprice them to a higher salary range, then you fix the issue at its core rather than just trying to patch it up until it leaks and bursts again.
And even with that salary differential, that's not even getting us to the market price. So if you were to take away that salary differential and give us our base pay, we're grossly underpaid for the amount of schooling that we have to have, the specialization, and the knowledge base that we have to have. You're not going to attract. It's pretty insulting.
I just want to thank you both for a great conversation so far. Before we close, do either of you have any final thoughts to share with our audience?
I think for the SLPs who are out there and other related service providers, your occupational therapists, your physical therapists, to just keep fighting the good fight. We're trying, we're working with the union, we're making baby steps here and there, but I believe that the state will eventually reprice us, because if not, then when? And if not us, then who? We need to be able to take care of the children that we have in the Department of Education, especially the vulnerable population. So I'm hoping that the state will make changes that are needed sooner rather than later before our workforce gets further hurt.
In closing, I think it's time for the employer groups to just change their way of thinking as far as how to deal with and address these issues, because it's obvious what has been the norm and what's been the practice has not worked, because that's contributing to where we are today. And we need to start changing the mindset and addressing this now, because as has been mentioned, it's going to get a lot worse with the amount of individuals that can retire within the next 5 years. And before it gets too late and it kind of spirals out of control, they need to start looking at different methods and working with us on these different methods to try to address these core issues on improving the compensation, the workplace environments, and things like that, so that employees will, one, it'll be attractive for new employees to come in, but two, once they come in, they don't leave. They stay and enjoy the place they work. So they stay for a lengthy career rather than coming in to get an experience for a few years and then going to somewhere else to make more money.
Well, I just want to mahalo both of you for joining us today. We really appreciate you all taking time out to share both perspectives, both of your stories with us. And we really appreciate all that you both do.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So join the conversation, folks. In the comments, let us know what you think about the vacancy issue. How do you think lawmakers should best solve the problem? And for more content like this, don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. We can't wait to see you back next month here at the negotiation table. But for now, we will see you all then.